Welcome all. Wonderful to have that uplifting start. Thank you to Regina Renee for choosing that music to get us going. I'm the Executive Director of Woolman Hill Retreat Center, which is located in Western Massachusetts. And we're so much looking forward to welcome back to the site once vaccinations are further underway and we can welcome you back to the land. We want to acknowledge that the land was taken unjustly, that Woolman Hill now occupies, is taken unjustly by English in the 1600s from a woman named Mashalisk of the Pecumtuck tribe. And we want to acknowledge that in this time of being on computer screens and separated from each other physically, that we are all on different pieces of land, has its own history, and that our virtual spaces also have been and still continue to be influenced by a history of white colony impacts. And that there is still much work to be done to restore right relationship with the land, with each other. Living Spirit, help us to be open to the invitation that Regina Renee is bringing us today. We're so grateful to have Regina Renee with us from Ujima Friends Center. And with her, Vanessa, who will be eldering, as well as Nathan and Raven and Dorothy. And thank you to Peter for his ushering this whole series into being. Welcome each of you, whatever your relationship is with the Bible, with the language of the divine, or however you name it. Wherever you are geographically, if you're seeing snow or grass or blossoms, welcome if this is your first time or sixth time with us or any in between. We're so grateful to all of you for forming this community to together explore the Bible. We invite you to just settle in your body. I'll lift up an image from Woolman Hill this past week of bluebirds flitting amongst the peach tree and landing on the ground near the meeting house porch, and of snowdrops in clumps filling the field. Welcome to this space in this moment. We'll be starting with a brief welcome from Beacon Hill Friends House with Jen, and she'll give a few tech tips. And then we'll settle into a little more opening worship. And out of that, Peter will invite Regina Renee to share a bit about her relationship with the Bible and why these particular passages spoke to her that she chose to focus on today. So we'll hear the passages, and there will be some queries to share on in small groups. And then we'll come back to a large group open sharing for some time after that. At that point, we will end the formal session, but people are welcome to stay for another period of open questions and answers and discussion informally after that if you'd like. We're delighted to share a sneak preview that we are extending our series for another 3 sessions this spring with Dr. Randy Woodley, who's a Kiowa Cherokee descendant and the co-creator of the Elohei Indigenous Center for Earth Justice. and he's a professor at George Fox University and Portland Seminary. And we'll have Benigno Sanchez-Epler with us from Northampton Meeting and his work with the Quaker Peace Institute of QB Yearly Meeting. And we'll also have Lynette Davis, who is currently an ESR student, Earlham School of Religion student, and part of Ujima Friends Center as well, Peace Friends Center. And she is doing a midweek program with Beacon Hill Friends House coming up. So we're just delighted to have those three, and you'll hear a little bit more about that at the very end from Peter. So welcome again. Thank you, and I'll hand it off to you, Jen.
Great. Thanks, Margaret. And welcome, friends. My name is Jen Higgins-Newman, and I'm the program manager here at Beacon Hill Friends House. This is a picture of the flowers that have just started to bloom, but it is snowing here now. Welcome, friends. And I'm going to turn things over to Regina Renee and Peter.
So, hello, Regina Renee. Welcome to everyone. That's already been said, but as soon as I had this sort of dream of doing a monthly Bible sessions for people from all around, I knew I wanted to have Regina Renee as one of the leaders, and I'm so glad that way is opened and you're able to be with us today.
Thank you.
I don't want to cut anymore because I know you have a lot on your heart. So I'm just going to ask you, first of all, if you could share a little about your own personal journey with this book we call the Bible.
Okay, so that's easy enough. We'll try and keep it short is the hard part. So my earliest memory of my relationship with the Bible is from Sunday school. I received a Bible of my very own for having perfect attendance in Sunday school. And it was just the best thing ever. And I still have that Bible. It means a lot to me, and it shaped me in many, many ways. I've had different phases of my life where I was in transitions, and my relationship with the Bible has changed and grown. A lot of that has been around discovering different translations of the Bible and how reading for yourself and reading from a variety of translations can inform what I get out of the Bible. So that has had a tremendous impact on me. Also, some things you may not know about me, and you can learn a lot about me through how I've engaged with the Bible. So one, I'm very competitive. And that showed up in my time, with the challenges of read the Bible in a year and participating in Bible bowls. And I was one of those camp children. So I went to Camp Idra Haji, I'd rather have Jesus. And I was that child. And so winning Bible bowl was a big thing. I'm also the nosiest person alive, like hands down. Some people have since, renamed it as being inquisitive or being curious, but I'm fine owning nosy. I'm the nosiest person alive. And the Bible is full of good books and good stories, and also letters. And reading letters that somebody has written to others that were not intended for you necessarily, it helped my little nosy streak. So all of that, sometimes these phases come and go, but they've all been a part of my growth and my relationship with the Bible. And it's been very earnest. One fork in the road would be divinity school. So the scholarly study of the Bible intrigued me so much. I was so happy. And I still have all the love in the world for Howard Divinity School. But in my experience, the scholarly study of the word often strips away the relationship with the word. And that was, my personal experience. And I am very much more concerned about my relationship with the Bible, with the divine, with my relationship to the word and how the word can impact me and impact others than I am with the scholarly pursuits. And so ultimately where I land is most important of all is how the Bible informs my relationship with God, who is my beloved. And the Bible does that for me and informs how I relate with other people and how I relate with myself. And so that's where I am when you want to know about my journey or the role that the Bible has played in my life. That's where I am at this point.
Thank you for those words. So I know that both Micah and James are very important to you. And what particularly led you to these, the sixth chapter of James, of Micah, and the first chapter of James to bring to us today?
So several things. One, in 1 Peter 4:10, we are instructed to serve one another with the gifts that we have received. And one of the gifts that God has given to me is the ability to explain things, but also the ability to encourage people. And the times that we're living in right now, people need to have a few things explained to them, and they definitely need encouragement. And so this is the time for it right now. I struggle and have struggled and will probably continue to struggle with Quakers when it comes to a collective desire to avoid conflict and confrontation. And that's a problem for me, but the Bible addresses that problem because we are called in Micah to do justice, not to read about justice, not to talk about justice, not to, oh, I'm going to listen this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to appropriate different practices from other people. Justice. We are called to do justice. And so the action is required. And so that's what always brings me to that verse. One, because again, as competitive as I am, I like rules and I like things to be clear. And it's clear that we are to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. The question comes in for me with how do I do that and why? Again, I'm nosy and it's like, how am I supposed to do these things so I can do them correctly, but why? And so that's where James comes in. How do we battle? And it is a battle. And I chose that word purposely. So there's no reason to talk to me about Quakers don't use that kind of language. One, I am decidedly Quaker. And I do use that language because we need to battle white supremacy. And in order to do that, we need to pay attention to the speed limits that are offered in James. And they're spiritual speed limits, but they are speed limits nonetheless. We need to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. So we have speed limits in our day-to-day lives to keep us safe and to keep our community safe. The same is true for our spiritual speed limits. We need to keep ourselves safe and we need to keep others safe. More harm has been done by the words that are uttered out of people's mouths, words that are well-intentioned some of the time, and I won't even say most, some of the time, but that cause harm. Our tongue is a weapon, and we need to be able to control it. control it, and direct it. And so when you ask about why now and why these verses now, it's because of all these reasons. We are dealing with a global pandemic, both COVID and racism, both pandemics, and both doing much harm. And in order to do what we need to do, we need to be equipped. And while we're doing what we need to do so with guidelines. And so we'll be spending some time with the spiritual speed limits and the clear directives of what we're called to do. But I also will spend some time in a bit talking about not just my love for the Bible, which I hope is clear, and how it is part of my everyday life and will continue to be, but also different ways we can approach the Bible when we're studying by ourselves and when we're studying in groups, because it is a different dynamic.
Do you want to go now, Regina Renee, to hear the passage from our readers?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So we have two friends. I know your names, but here they are. Barry and Carla are going to read to us. And so I think you know your order.
With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body, for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God.
Oh, sorry. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, for your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore, rid yourselves of all this sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. But be doers of the word and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror, for they look at themselves and on going away immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in all of their doing. If any think that they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for the orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world.
Thank you. Okay. So now, excuse me. Yeah. Thank you. Now I'd like to spend some time doing what the description for this time together mentioned. On the website, it said, we'll look at approaches to the Bible. And these are two approaches that have been most meaningful to me over a period of time. So I'm going to start with the SOAP method, SOAP, and how it's been beneficial for individual study. And I will begin by reading, and then I will apply it to the text that we've just heard. So you begin with the scripture. Which scriptures speak to my heart? Write out one verse that was meaningful to me. And I did, and I do write scripture. It has a different impact, just like when you hear, when you read, and when you write. So if you write out the verses that are meaningful to you, it will have a different impact. 2 is observation. What stood out to me about this verse? What truth can I learn? Were there any commands or instructions? What was God saying to me? So this is what God was saying to me. Trials serve a purpose. We need to ask for what we need. Speed limits are for safety. If we don't adhere to them, we can injure relationships with ourselves, with others, and with God. Action is required. My religion is worthless if I don't bridle my tongue. And at that point, I did look up bridle because, it does have 2 meanings. Even when you're talking about controlling the horse, it also gives direction. So I need to be careful with my tongue, not just as far as controlling what I say, but directing what I say in appropriate ways. So those were my initial observations. Application. How does this verse apply to my life today? How can I live differently in light of this truth? Peter had asked me why now and why these verses now. 1, because we're facing tremendous trials, and that's how James begins. When we face trials, we need to consider it joy, because that testing of the faith produces endurance. And most importantly, for full effect, I need to be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. And to do that, I have to go through the trials. And there are plenty of trials right now, and going through them is what is going to produce and result in me being a mature and complete Christian, a mature and complete child of God. So finally, when I'm studying by myself, when I look at prayer, and this is something that is new and more of a struggle because it's not yet a habit, is write or say a prayer asking how to implement this verse in my life. I know the ways that I think I need to implement it, but I need to convene, have a little prayer meeting with the Creator so that I know what the Creator has in store. What does she want me to do? How am I going to implement the verse in my life? And also praying for others who may be dealing with a similar issue. I'm not the only person who needs to watch her mouth. That's clear. So praying for others who have that similar issue. And remembering to praise God for their blessings and for opening my eyes to the truths. Because sometimes things are hard to see. And when my eyes are opened, I need to thank God for it. So that's how I engage when I'm studying by myself. When I'm engaging with the Bible, with a group, it varies depending on the group. However, I did want to bring forward Joanne and Larry C. Spears' friendly Bible study method, in that it speaks directly to Quakers. And so it's important for me as I do this work to think about early friends and their relationship with the Bible. It's like for me to engage with early friends in their writings and to engage fully, I need to be in conversation with the Bible. I will miss references. I will miss or misinterpret meanings of passages from early friends if I'm not paying attention and being aware of what's said biblically. So the thing that I really like about this, and that's pointed out in using the friendly Bible study method, is that there is personal experience taken into account. Everybody present at the Bible study is on equal terms. It's not who has their MDiv or who's been studying the longest and who can, tell you the Greek and talk to you about all these different nuances. It's everybody being equal. It also acknowledges continuing revelation. And maybe most importantly for me, it affirms the connection between the biblical witness and what's going on in present time. So when we're taking the time to use the friendly Bible study method, there are some questions to ask. What is the author's main point in the passage? So this is what is the author saying. This is not an interpretation. This is not what you think. What is the author's main point? 2, new light. What new light do I find in this particular reading of this passage of the text? 3, and this is where Quakers do Bible study differently. And this is where some people who may not have been able to engage with scripture, I hope can find a way in. Truth. Is this passage true to my experience? Sometimes the answer will be yes, sometimes not. But just engaging with the question allows you to still engage with the Bible and do so authentically. 4, implications. What are the implications of this passage for my life? And 5, again, something that's quite clear with Quakers, what problems do I have with this passage? Taking the time to name the problems that you have, whether it be language, which is why I chose the New Revised Standard Version. Whatever problems you have with the passage, being able to acknowledge those and deal with that, that is part of the study. And I grew up believing and still believe that my God is big enough and strong enough to handle my questions. Asking a question is not a problem. And so these are 2 of the ways that I would just encourage friends to consider engaging with the Bible. These are 2 approaches that I wanted to share. Thank you. You can go to the next. So we are going to be splitting into breakout rooms. And I would like us to spend some time. There are 3 queries. I do not expect you to answer all 3. One may speak to you and the others not. But I do want everyone to have all 3 in their hearing, and you will have them so that you can see them as well. Early friends lived with the Bible. They used the Bible as a source of guidance, and their writings are filled with biblical quotations and references. How has your relationship with the Bible been influenced by early friends and/or their writings? Next, you will see the verses that we lifted up. James 1:19. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. James 1:26. If any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. What are the implications of the passage for my life? For my life. How does this verse apply to my life today? How can I live differently in light of this truth? And finally, what would change in my life if I had better control or discipline over my listening, my speaking, and my anger?
Peter, I think everyone is back.
Okay, so welcome back. I hope you found that helpful. We're going to throw it wide open now.
Okay, so thank you, Alan. And I'm going to do two things here. One, I had mentioned earlier that translation makes a difference. And so I'm going to read from the New International Version, just two parts, starting with James 1:19 and 20. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. And I will put the emphasis, and the emphasis is mine, on human anger does not produce righteousness that God desires. So there are several things here. It doesn't say don't become angry. It says be slow to anger. So just paying attention to the speed there. It's not about not being angry. But also, when given the reason why, it's because human anger. And so if there's human anger being lifted up, that means there are other types of anger as well. And one thing that I try very mightily to do, particularly when we're talking about racial justice issues and all social justice issues, is putting things together. There's no one verse or text that stands alone. That's why I asked for you to read the entire book of James, to have some context, and pairing it with Micah for a reason, with the due justice. So if we're trying to be slow to anger, not being angry, but slow to anger and doing the justice, that means you might be angry. You might get angry, but that righteous anger is going to be different than human anger. The righteous anger is going to lead to change and results, whether that change is systemic, whether that change is within you, within your family, within your community. That righteous anger is going to produce the results. That's why it says human anger does not. So I hope that answers your question, Alan.
Carla?
This is going to sound humorous, but I raise it here based on what you guys just said. It just so happened this week, I've been trying to go back and watch The Jeffersons as an adult versus as a child and see it from a different point of view. And there was an episode on The Jeffersons where a KKK member moved into the building and would not do, he didn't want to touch a mannequin that had been touched by a Black person, and he was trying to recruit the white people in the building to be a part of the KKK. The reason I bring this up is that there was a misunderstanding. They thought he was coming there to create a meeting for like safety in the building, and George Jefferson shows up and he's like, "You don't belong here." And he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm down with the same thing." He was like, "Absolutely not, we're the KKK." And so George begins to try to fight this man. So all of the white men are holding on to him, and he's like jumping over this guy. He's ready to knock him out. The person who was leading the KKK group and trying to do it starts to have a heart attack. There's only one person in the room who could bring him back to life, and it was George Jefferson. And so he was doing CPR on this white man who just said that he hated him and that he should die, et cetera, et cetera. He brings him back. And the rest of the people in the room are saying to him, you know, George, you did a great thing. And he said, that man would have killed me, right? I don't believe that I'm not sure if I did the right thing. And they kept saying, no, like, you're the better man. And they were going on and on. And he was like, he got over his anger with this man to save his life. And then the man comes back to life and he's still, you know, angry, a terrible person, whatever. And he says to his son, George should have just let me die rather than having those black lips touch my body. But the beauty of the episode was his son, he was teaching his son to be a KKK member. And at the end of the episode, despite the fact that the father didn't change, the son said, I can't align myself with such ideology when you just saved my father's life. And so that's what I thought of in the human anger versus a very godly anger in that context.
Annie?
First off, Regina Renee, I'm so grateful for your lifting up these passages, and also the friendly Bible study. I'm really looking forward to that. I was really struck by the work I've done for justice has been a lot of looking at the roots of racism in my upbringing in my early childhood, as well as, of course, what we all face today. But as a white woman, you know, being raised to be really kind of nice. And I mentioned this in our group, I was thinking about it in relationship to these passages, because it's been really clear to me for a long while now that my work, the work for justice that I feel God calling me to and calling us to as friends, is about laying that aside. And it's not rightly ordered for me to be loyal to my family with the patterns of behavior that go along with hiding behind things, and hiding behind the idea that I have to be quiet or seen and not heard kind of thing. And I love this. I love it. It actually really fills me with such joy for us that I can feel a joy in the work of justice in these passages. It just leaps right at me, and I'm really grateful for that. And I'm also really grateful for the reminder of the insight of human anger and the other, which to me is about speaking truth to power. So I just want to say thanks for this.
Early friends took these two passages about the tongue very, very seriously, in ways that would probably feel very strange in some cases to us today. I don't know if I'm right about this, but I think I am, that ordinarily when a friend was walking down the street and a stranger came to them and said, "Good day" to you, the friend usually did not respond. And I'm sure that in many cases that led to the conclusion that the friend was being proud or snobbish or something like that. But I think it had to do with wanting to be very careful not to say things just because of sort of fashion or something like that. And so it wasn't just being holding back from anger, human anger, and gossip and some things that we usually think of, but simply wanting to stay very, very close to what was really truth. And I'm not saying we have to not say hello to people today, but I do think we need to think a lot more clearly about I think even the whole idea of truth being a really strict thing isn't as much talked about among friends today, like whether or not we should be strictly honest on our taxes and things like that. The only other thing I want to say is that many years ago, I was in a young adult friends group that prided itself on egalitarianism. And there wasn't hardly any people of color in the group, but it had to do with gender. And so somebody decided to try and find out if we were doing what we say, so to speak. So they kept track in business meeting of how often men spoke, how often women spoke, and how long they spoke. And he reported to the group that men were speaking 3/4 of the time, and if you took into account length of time, 4/5 of the time. And everybody fell off their benches. They were so shocked. And that actually led to deciding to try experimenting with reinstituting separate men's and women's meetings to kind of give people a chance to have more airtime, so to speak. And, you know, I don't know that we have a chance to clock it very much. We don't have in most groups a high percentage of friends of color, but certainly, I don't know if anybody's ever clocked it at like a New England Yearly meeting, for instance, with men and women. And I know I was at a conference once, which was over half people of color, a high percentage of young people, over half young people. I was in a minority in every possible group. And somebody at the end of the week, when I thought I was being pretty good, came up to me and said, there are 2 people out of 50 here who are over 30, male and white. You're one of them. And believe me, the 2 of you spoke a lot more than 1/25 of the time. So again, I hear the message.
Okay, so let's take this opportunity to think about the quick to listen part. I haven't heard a lot from people here about being quick to listen. And do you differentiate between listening and hearing? And what does it look like to be quick to listen?
David?
Well, this counterposing of speaking and listening reminds me very much of how I've come to understand prayer in the Quaker context. And before I met friends, praying was an awful lot of telling God what we wanted, saying how things ought to be, speaking. And particularly Quaker worship that may be based in waiting worship has much more to do with listening. So these goes together. I mean, if we can learn it in our prayer life, we might learn it in our interpersonal life as well.
Reb?
I was in a planning group recently with some Indigenous friends, and I was conscious of the fact that this was very much a group that was planning an event about water, which actually Beacon Hill will be hosting a week from tomorrow. And I wanted those folks to be able to share before I spoke. And I think that's important for us to think about as folks who are in the dominant group, that we would make way for friends who have historically been challenged as far as their voice goes amongst us. that we would try to make way for that when we have that opportunity.
Tommy?
Thank you. Regina Renee, thank you for your further description about your choice of those passages, because the comparing human anger and righteousness. I think it helped me to reflect on my response to all of James. And I mean, it's particularly in James 5, it's hard for me to read that without bringing to mind settler colonialism and all of that, you know, facing all of that. And I was telling a friend the other day, a small community group that I'm part of has been trying to explain to our city council that we need to spend less money on the police and create safety in other ways. And I think this is, and the backdrop is settler colonialism and policing. And I told her that, and they had said they were going to use an equity lens in adjusting the budget because the budget's completely out of whack. And then people proceeded to actually say, well, we need to keep equity in mind because there's been anti-Asian violence and we need to have police to address this. And I was so apoplectic. I mean, human anger, I could hardly, when I think about it, I can't even think straight. Because we've had problems in the Bay Area and Oakland, Chinatown, and the Asian community has said, do not use policing as an option because it endangers us and it endangers Black residents. And so to have these terms, I mean, speaking to your point about when people say things, they can be hurtful, like taking this value of equity and twisting it around to support the current state makes me crazy. So my challenge is even how to express that and to settle into a place. I mean, I know I can do it. And in a way, for me, because I tend to be slow to anger, it's good to know that anger tells me it's an important place to begin. And I know that I can settle into that. And so that is my job, is to settle into that and find some way to express it, whether they hear it or listen to it or not. But I feel like that is my job ahead, along with my colleagues and allies.
We're coming up on the end of our formal time together, and I'm wondering if Regina Renee, you would like to have the last word here.
Okay, good. Thank you for saying that, because I was going to say, if you're able to stay around, please do so, and I will continue to engage with you. One thing that I did want to lift up that came up in my small group is that there are many ways to speak, and we're not always speaking with our words, and we're not always speaking with our mouths. Our lives speak as well. And so making sure that we think about that when we look at everything in context and not trying to do one thing at a time and separating It was just like, we live lives that are connected to each other. We live lives that are just intersectional in so many ways, and trying to separate what we do and separate our readings and separate what we learn and what we hear. We want to be complete and whole, as we're told in James 1. And to do that, we need to go through these trials and tribulations so that we can be complete. And so I want to thank you, especially those of you who are not in relationship with the Bible, for taking the time to engage and to, even be here and to listen and to do something that was out of your comfort zone, perhaps. And so I do want to acknowledge that I don't take this for granted. I don't take it for granted that people will step out of their comfort zones. And so I appreciate the engagement. I appreciate you listening. I work very hard to listen to my guide. And so I hope that I was well used, and that is my prayer. So thank you for allowing me to be used in this way.
So thank you so much, Regina Renee, for bringing this to us. As everyone knows, you're welcome to be free now, but also we hope if you are free, you can stick around a little bit. We'll probably go for 20, 30 more minutes. But I want to thank some people formally now. I want to thank Nathan and Raven Moon for holding the session. I want to thank Vanessa July and Dorothy Henderson for eldering for Regina Renee and myself. And I want to thank Barry Scott and Carla Kroom for being readers for us today. And I want to especially thank Woolman Hill and Beacon Hill for making this series possible. It would not have been possible, believe me, if you hadn't come forward in response to my request. And Woolman Hill is, I hope, within the next 6 months, going to be able to open again. You need to flood their halls as soon as they open their doors. Your contributions today, which I also want to thank you for, partly did go to support Woolman Hill and Beacon Hill, but not nearly enough to keep them open or pay their salaries. So Woolman Hill is doing a building program right now. So if you have the ability to do it, I'm sure they will greatly welcome a larger donation to support making their facilities more accessible, more available to support Friends. And Beacon Hill has a wonderful array of programs that are helping us to get through this pandemic. So please check those out. I know that Jen just a few minutes ago put up the new sign up, and as was mentioned earlier, I think by Margaret, we have 3 wonderful people. Randy Woodley, who is a Indigenous theologian who teaches at Portland Seminary and George Fox University, has agreed to come and be one of our Bible leaders. Benigno Sanchez Epler, who some of you know through being the former head of the clerk of Friends World Committee for the Americas, is going to be in the May series, and he is actually going to be at FGC following in Regina Renee's footsteps as the Bible leader. And Carl, I saw at least was earlier here. Carl Magruder was last summer's wonderful Bible leader. And Benigno will be the July summer gathering Bible leader at Friends General Conference. And we're closing out this wonderful spring series with Lynette Davis, who is at Earlham School of Religion, and you can check out her blog. There's a link to it on the website where you can read some of the things she's doing. And you can also come here, I think in about a week, she's going to be at the Wednesday evening program, I think a week from Wednesday.